listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, Australian sprinting superstar Is Gout Gout. The 17-year-old has beaten his own 200-metre national record at his first major senior world event. So what's the science behind his record-breaking speed, and could he really be on track to become our next Usain Bolt? But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 25th of June. The US president has hit back at a leaked intelligence report that contradicts his claims that America's missile attacks had obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions. CNN and the New York Times are both reporting the Defense Intelligence Agency's analysis of the damage in Iran did not destroy key components of its nuclear program, with sources saying it was largely left intact and also claiming some of the enriched uranium had been moved out of the sites prior to the US attacks. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called the report flat out wrong, adding it was leaked to CNN by an anonymous, quote, low-level loser in the intelligence community. Donald Trump calling it fake news.
It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people.
It comes after the US president dropped the F-bomb while lashing out at both Israel and Iran for not adhering to the ceasefire. Journalist Antoinette Lattouf has won her unlawful termination case against the ABC. Miss Lattouf has been awarded $70,000 after the federal court found the ABC contravened the Fair Work Act when it terminated her employment after she shared a human rights post on Gaza on social media. Antoinette was taken off air 3 days into a 5-day casual shift with the ABC as a radio presenter in 2023. Here is Miss Lattouf outside court.
In December 2023, I shared a Human Rights Watch post because Human Rights Watch found that Israel was using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza. It is now June 2025 and Palestinian children are still being starved. Today the court has found that punishing someone for sharing facts about these war crimes is also illegal.
Antoinette Lattouf is also host of the Weekend Briefing. And 24 years after Peter Falconio disappeared, Northern Territory Police have announced a new reward for any information to help find the missing backpacker's body. Authorities have now increased the reward from $250,000 to $500,000. Bradley John Murdoch is currently serving a life sentence for fatally shooting Falconio and also attempting to kidnap his girlfriend Joanne Lees. Murdoch is currently in Alice Springs Hospital dying from terminal throat cancer. He has always refused to reveal the whereabouts of Mr. Falconio's body. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with movement scientist Dr Dylan Hicks about Gout Gout and how he has become an international force in the sporting world, breaking records and following in the footsteps of the fastest man on earth, Usain Bolt.
Expects Amenya to lead into the straight, and Gout their third from left come back at him once they get into the straight. His first race as a pro in Europe, this from Gout Gout. Now he's got a target. Menya moving away from him, or is he? In the headband, a battle between these two, and Gout working so hard to get to him, and he gets there. Gout takes it by a metre and moving away, 20.04. It's a personal best for Gout.
Dylan, thanks so much for joining us. I don't like to use this phrase often, but you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that Gout Gout is certainly rewriting Australian sporting history?
Oh, he certainly is. And I think if last night is any foreshadowing of what's going to happen at the upcoming World Championships, Australia's in for another big treat with Gout Gout.
So take us through exactly why he's back in the headlines again, because he's been performing incredibly well. We'll go through some of his records he's broken shortly, but overnight he actually set a new 200-metre record at the Golden Spike event, his senior international debut. No pressure.
No, that's right. And I think often when you think of junior athletes heading overseas to take on, the open age athletes in Europe, you might expect that maybe they don't go so well as what they've been going in Australia, but he's obviously delivered the goods, and in that run in Ostrava, broken his own Australian record and Oceania record and lowered that by 0.02. So now, down to 20.02, and also in beating, the athlete from Cuba who's been in really hot form overseas at the moment. It really solidifies that, yep, he's the real deal.
So, Dylan, break it down for us. How much of a big achievement was this win for Gout Gout, this most recent win, as we said, at his senior international debut?
I think it's more, Natasha, thinking about, the time that he ran in Australia. His 19.8 in Australia was at the national championship. He was obviously peaking for that. And this is his first trip overseas to Europe to compete. And so, yeah, it's a really big achievement. It's a confidence booster for not only Gout, but his coach and the team. They've got another race in Europe and then come home to regroup and reload before the World Championships in Tokyo.
Dylan, let's go through some of the recent stats with Gout Gout. Over a 7-month period, he actually won silver in the 200 metre at the World Junior Championships. Also, he broke Peter Norman's long-standing Australian 200 metre record, and in Brisbane, he smashed through the magical 20-second barrier for the 200 metre race, recording a world-leading 19.98 seconds. Do you believe this is just the beginning of an incredible performance we're going to see from Gout Gout moving forward?
Yeah, I do. And then, other sort of leading academics and sprint coaches around Australia and the world, definitely think the same as well. And that was preceding the national championships as well, where he also, ran a 20.2. And then in the final of the 200, ran that amazing 1984 windy, so I was a little bit tailwind behind him. But to see him break through and to run a time which is not just inside 20 seconds, but quite away inside, it was remarkable. And obviously people have been thinking, is he going to be the next big thing? And like we were sort of speaking about, when you break down the stats, his maturation and obviously him remaining healthy and working with his amazing coaching in his training partners, these things, it just seems inevitable that the time's just going to keep coming down. And when you think that people like, Noah Lyles and Michael Johnson and Usain Bolt, these are the people that, that final segment of his 200 metres, that's who he's been compared against. He's running the times which those athletes have run, and they're some of the best that we've ever seen. So he's very, very special.
So in regards to what makes him so special, Dylan, break this down for us, because I understand with his style, he literally kind of races out of the gates during that straight. Take us through what makes him such an incredible athlete.
Yeah, I think the thing which stood out for me originally is that when you see him come off the bend, maybe there's nothing that's too, apart from his age, maybe the times don't show you that there's anything remarkable in that first 100 of the 200. And as soon as he comes off the bend, he has this real elastic, bouncy motion. He takes a really, a small amount of strides compared to other athletes and just covers the ground without losing any speed. And you sort of think, well, what are the biomechanical characteristics that allow him to do that, whereas all these seasoned athletes or the ones we've seen in the past seem to do it in a little bit of a different strategy. And so I guess, the biomechanists around the world and the coaches are trying to analyze every step to think, what's he doing, which other athletes aren't doing? And I think a lot of it, it's quite natural. It's not something which has been trained. He's obviously got, some special gifts, but largely, we believe it's to do with his light body mass, his light limbs, where the mass is located on his body, and then this, inherent stiffness in the Achilles tendon to effectively, store and release this elastic energy, almost like a rubber band snapping, and he gets this propulsive force every time that his foot comes off the ground. And so he just covers the ground a lot more efficient than the other athletes. And that efficiency is obviously going to come at a reduced fatigue as well. So, he's pretty remarkable in that sense. But you know what, just saying that, I had various messages this morning from coaches in Melbourne and Sydney saying, did you see the result last night? And then when I looked at it, I thought, I think he's changed something, in that final section where I thought, no, it doesn't actually look as bouncy as what it did in Perth when he ran that 19.8 or the 20.2. And when I've spoken to an American coach not long ago, he said, Dylan, I think he's going to have to, there's a bit of a trade-off in sprinting between stride length and stride frequency. And they were saying, I think that length is getting a little bit too long now. He might have to dial it back a bit and increase the strides per second. And to me, that's what it looked like. And so I went back through the video this morning and just roughly just counted it myself. And he's taken approximately 2 to 3 extra strides in that last section. So, maybe they're working on some different strategies to improve the result overall.
Dylan, in regards to Gout Gout's story, you mentioned there before, obviously he's training with some of the best in the world and changing his technique accordingly, but obviously he's incredibly naturally gifted. Take us back through his early sporting life. Was that incredible talent spotted quite early?
Yeah, I think, obviously only second-hand information when you go back and listen to, that spotlight story that he had on Channel 7, and then, you hear of his coach Di, spotting this athlete on the fields in Toowoomba, whether that's PE or sport, and just thinking this person's got something. And I think a lot of athletics coaches, they do have that intuition that this person might do something a little bit different, and she's definitely discovered someone who's got a lot of talent, put in a lot of hard work. But the stories about Gout started to come through when he was sort of 13 to 14, when he was running really low 21 seconds for a 200, and you could see that he's still learning about the event. He's obviously got a little bit of a different style to what it looks like, but I guess overall the time is the time. And if you can cover the ground in the shortest period of time, whatever that might look like, that's why he's got a great coach to sort of help him really dial in that craft.
Dylan, you mentioned earlier there are already comparisons being made to Usain Bolt and other great athletes during our time and sprinters. Do you think Gout Gout has that capability to be one of the greatest we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to put any extra pressure on him. I think he's obviously got a lot of pressure with all the media, and then you can see that with all the meets. But personally, yeah, I do. I can definitely see that this year, he's probably going to make the World Championships final, in my opinion. I think he's got the goods to be able to do that. It looks like he has a pretty good demeanour to deal with that pressure, not going on his first race overseas. And so, yeah, it won't surprise me that if he makes that world final. And, as we progress through, I mean, he's only 17, so you sort of think, most of the sprinters in the Olympic finals and who win the medals are sort of, mid to early 20s. So as you fast forward, I think you can really dial in some times that go into the, 19.7 soon, 19.5, maybe next year or the year after, and it starts to come down. So I really think he can.
He's an extraordinary athlete and we wish him all the best, and we really appreciate you joining us. Thanks, Dylan.
No worries. Thanks for your time.
That was movement scientist from Flinders University, Dr Dylan Hicks. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.